Hello, friends. Welcome back to Book Demystified once again. And today we're going to discuss about the book Happy Money by Elizabeth Dunn and Michael Norton. Now, let me ask you something that's probably been bugging you for a while. Why is it that every time you get a raise or a bonus, you feel amazing for like 2 weeks, and then you're back to feeling the same level of stress about money? You work overtime, you finally buy that thing you've been wanting forever, you treat yourself to that expensive dinner, but somehow the happiness just fades away. And then you're stuck thinking, if money can't buy happiness, why am I working 60 hours a week trying to make more of it? I had this exact conversation with my friend Jessica last month. She just got promoted to marketing manager at her company here in Denver. Decent pay bump, and she was so excited. But 3 weeks later, she's sitting in my kitchen complaining about how she still feels stressed about money, still feels like she's not getting ahead, still feels like something's missing. She looked at me and said, "I thought making more money would make me happier, but I feel exactly the same. What's wrong with me?" And here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with her. There's something wrong with how we've been taught to think about money and happiness. That's where this incredible book comes in, and I'm telling you, it's going to completely flip your understanding of the relationship between money and joy. Dunn and Norton aren't just throwing around feel-good advice here. They're Harvard and University of British Columbia researchers who spent years studying the science of spending. And what they discovered is going to blow your mind. They found that money absolutely can buy happiness, but we're all spending it wrong. We're following these outdated rules about what should make us happy, and it's literally stealing joy from our lives while keeping us stressed about money. But here's what gets me excited about sharing this with you today. These researchers didn't just identify the problem, they cracked the code. They figured out the exact principles that can transform your relationship with money from a source of stress into a genuine source of joy. We're talking about simple shifts in how you spend that can make you happier without spending a single extra dollar. In fact, some of these strategies will actually help you spend less while feeling more satisfied with your purchases. You know what's crazy? I realized I was doing everything backwards after reading this book. Last year, I saved up $3,000 to buy this amazing new laptop setup. Top of the line everything, 4K monitor, mechanical keyboard, the works. I was so excited, spent weeks researching every component, finally ordered everything, and for about a week, I felt like I was living in the future. But a month later, that expensive setup just felt normal, and I was already eyeing the next upgrade. Meanwhile, my neighbor Tom spent $50 taking his kids to a local baseball game, and he's still talking about it 6 months later with this huge smile on his face. That's when it hit me. I was spending for the wrong reasons and in the wrong ways. I was trying to buy happiness through stuff, but Tom was buying happiness through experiences and connection. The science backs this up completely, but somehow our culture has convinced us that accumulating things is the path to joy. We've got it totally backwards, and it's costing us both money and happiness. Let me tell you about one of the most fascinating studies these researchers conducted. They gave people money and split them into 2 groups. One group had to spend it on themselves, the other group had to spend it on someone else. Guess which group ended up happier? The ones who spent money on others. This completely contradicts everything we've been taught about money and self-care and treating ourselves, but the data is clear-cut. Spending money on other people makes us happier than spending it on ourselves. This reminds me of something that happened to me during the holidays last year. I had budgeted about $400 for Christmas gifts, and I was dreading it because money was tight and I was stressed about every purchase. But instead of buying expensive gifts for everyone, I decided to try something different. I spent that same $400, but I focused on meaningful, thoughtful gifts that showed I really knew what each person needed or wanted. My sister had been talking about wanting to try yoga. So instead of buying her some generic expensive thing, I got her a month of classes at a local studio. Cost me $80, but she's still doing yoga a year later and credits that gift with changing her health routine. The happiness I got from seeing her genuine excitement and watching how that gift kept giving throughout the year was incredible. Compare that to previous years when I'd spend twice as much on some gadget she'd use for a month and forget about. Same money, completely different emotional return on investment. That's the power of what Dunn and Norton call pro-social spending. Money spent in ways that benefit others and strengthen relationships. But here's what gets really interesting. This isn't just about being nice to people. The researchers found that pro-social spending actually creates a positive feedback loop. When you spend money on others, it makes you happier, which makes you more likely to be generous in the future, which makes you even happier. It's like compound interest, but for joy instead of money. Meanwhile, spending money only on yourself can actually create the opposite effect. You get a temporary boost, but then you need bigger and bigger purchases to get that same feeling. I see this pattern everywhere in American culture. We work crazy hours to afford bigger houses, fancier cars, more expensive vacations, but somehow we're stressed and less happy than previous generations who had less stuff. The average American house is twice as big as it was in the 1950s, but rates of anxiety and depression have skyrocketed. We're winning the stuff game, but losing the happiness game. And this book explains exactly why.
One of the core principles Dunn and Norton discovered is what they call buying experiences over things. This isn't just hippie advice. There's solid science behind it. When you buy a physical object, you get used to it pretty quickly. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation, and it's why that new car smell wears off, why your dream apartment starts feeling normal after a few months, why even winning the lottery doesn't make people happy long-term. But experiences are different. They don't just give you happiness in the moment. They continue to provide joy through anticipation before the experience and through memories after it's over. Plus, experiences tend to improve over time in our memories. That camping trip where it rained the whole time becomes a funny story you laugh about for years. That expensive watch you bought just sits there, depreciating in value and emotional impact. I learned this lesson the hard way when I was in my 20s. I had this job that paid pretty well, and I kept buying stuff. New clothes, electronics, furniture, you name it. My apartment looked like a Pottery Barn catalog, but I felt empty inside. Then I started redirecting that spending towards experiences, concerts, weekend trips, cooking classes, rock climbing lessons. Same budget, completely different life satisfaction. Those experiences didn't just make me happier, they made me more interesting, gave me stories to tell, helped me meet new people, and taught me skills I still use today. The key insight from the research is that experiences become part of who you are in a way that possessions never can. You don't just own an experience, you become someone who has done that thing. When I tell people I spent a weekend learning to make pasta from scratch in a little Italian cooking class, it's not just a story, it's part of my identity now. I'm someone who knows how to make fresh pasta. That $60 class has given me years of satisfaction and confidence in the kitchen. Another game-changing principle from this book is about timing and how it affects our happiness from spending. Most of us do what the researchers call consumption bundling. We save up for something big and then buy it all at once. But Dunn and Norton found that spreading out purchases and savoring the anticipation actually multiplies our happiness. It's better to buy several smaller things over time than one big thing all at once. This completely changed how I approach bigger purchases. Instead of saving up to buy a whole new wardrobe at once, I'll buy one really nice piece every few months. Instead of taking one expensive week-long vacation, I'll take several smaller trips throughout the year. Each purchase or experience gets its own moment of anticipation and excitement, instead of everything blurring together into one big spend. Hey, if you're enjoying our free book summaries and want to support what we do, there are a few easy ways to help. You can subscribe to the channel, become a member, or grab the book using our affiliate link in the description. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can also leave a tip via PayPal or UPI. The link's below. Every bit of support helps us keep creating valuable content for you. Now, one of the most practical insights from this research is about what they call making it a treat. We've gotten so used to having everything available all the time that nothing feels special anymore. You can get any food delivered to your door, stream any movie instantly, buy anything online and have it tomorrow. But constant access actually reduces happiness. When everything is available, nothing is special. The solution is to deliberately create scarcity for yourself. Make your favorite coffee shop a weekend treat instead of a daily habit. Save that expensive restaurant for special occasions instead of going whenever you feel like it. Buy fewer clothes, but make each purchase more intentional and special. This isn't about depriving yourself, it's about rediscovering the joy of anticipation and the satisfaction of something being special. I started applying this principle to my Netflix habits, and it sounds silly, but it actually works. Instead of binge-watching entire seasons in one weekend, I limit myself to 1 or 2 episodes at a time. It makes me look forward to watching more, and each episode feels more satisfying because I'm not just mindlessly consuming content. Same principle works with food, shopping, entertainment, anything that you've made too routine and accessible. The researchers also discovered something fascinating about money and time pressure. When we're rushing to make purchases or we feel time pressure, we tend to focus on price and convenience instead of what will actually make us happy. But when we slow down and really think about our purchases, we make much better decisions. They call this mindful spending, and it's one of the most practical tools in the book. Before I make any purchase over $100 now, I wait at least 24 hours and ask myself 3 questions. Will this still make me happy a month from now? Does this purchase align with my values and what I really care about? And am I buying this because I genuinely want it or because I'm stressed, bored, or trying to keep up with someone else? Those 3 questions have saved me thousands of dollars and prevented countless purchases I would have regretted. One story from the book that really stuck with me is about a couple who were spending a fortune on their daily coffee habit, like $12 a day between the two of them. They were stressed about money, but couldn't figure out where it was all going. When they tracked their spending, they realized they were dropping over $3,000 a year on coffee without even thinking about it. But here's the twist. When they made their coffee purchases more intentional, they actually enjoyed coffee more while spending less.
Instead of grabbing coffee on autopilot every morning, they started making really good coffee at home most days and treating the coffee shop as a special experience a couple times a week. They'd go together on Saturday mornings, try new places, make it a mini date. Same amount of coffee happiness, but for about a third of the cost. Plus, it became a shared experience that brought them closer together instead of just a rushed transaction on the way to work. This connects to another major finding from the research. Social connection is one of the most reliable predictors of happiness, and how we spend money can either strengthen or weaken our relationships. Spending money in ways that bring us together with others consistently produces more happiness than spending money on ourselves alone. This doesn't mean you always have to spend money on other people, but it does mean that purchases that facilitate connection and shared experiences tend to be better investments in happiness. I think about how this plays out in American culture, where we've become so individualistic about everything, including our spending. We all have our own streaming subscriptions, our own gym memberships, our own everything, instead of finding ways to share experiences and costs. But some of my happiest memories involve shared purchases, splitting the cost of a vacation rental with friends, going in together on a nice bottle of wine for a dinner party, pooling money for a group gift for someone special. The book also addresses something that I think is particularly relevant for our generation: the role of social media in our spending decisions. We're constantly seeing other people's highlight reels, their vacations, their purchases, their seemingly perfect lives, and it creates this pressure to keep up. But Dunn and Norton's research shows that spending money to impress others or to signal status rarely leads to lasting happiness. In fact, it often creates the opposite effect: anxiety, debt, and a constant feeling of not being enough. I fell into this trap hard when I first started my career. I was making decent money for the first time in my life, and I started buying things that I thought would make me look successful. Expensive suits, a fancy watch, dinners at trendy restaurants that I'd post on Instagram. But none of it made me actually feel successful or happy. It just made me anxious about maintaining that image and keeping up with the spending required to project success. The turning point came when I started focusing on what the researchers call identity-congruent spending, purchasing things that align with who I actually am and what I actually value, not what I think will impress other people. For me, that meant spending money on books, experiences that help me learn new skills, and quality time with people I care about. My bank account is healthier, my stress levels are lower, and I actually feel more authentic and satisfied with my life. Another crucial insight from the research is about the relationship between money and time. Most of us make the mistake of always choosing to save money over saving time, even when we're financially comfortable enough to make the opposite choice. We'll spend an hour driving across town to save $10 on something, or we'll do our own yard work instead of hiring help so we can spend that time with our families. But the research shows that buying time through services that handle tasks we don't enjoy can significantly increase happiness, especially for people who are stressed about having enough time for the things they care about. This was a hard lesson for me to learn because I grew up with the mentality that you only pay someone else to do something if you absolutely can't do it yourself. But there's a difference between can't and shouldn't. Now I pay someone to clean my house twice a month, and it's honestly one of the best purchases I've ever made. That's 4 hours every month that I get to spend doing things I actually enjoy instead of scrubbing toilets. The cost is totally worth it for the time and mental energy it gives me back. Same thing with grocery delivery when I'm swapped at work, or hiring someone to do my taxes instead of spending a weekend wrestling with TurboTax. The key is being strategic about which time-saving purchases actually increase your happiness. Paying for convenience just to be lazy doesn't have the same effect as paying for convenience so you can spend time on things that matter to you. It's about buying time for purpose, not just buying time for the sake of it. One of the most counterintuitive findings in this book is about the relationship between money and certainty. Most of us think that financial security means having enough money to handle any possible expense or emergency. But the research suggests that having too much certainty about our financial future can actually reduce happiness. Some level of positive uncertainty and anticipation makes life more exciting and purchases more satisfying. This doesn't mean you should be financially reckless, but it does mean that constantly optimizing and over-planning every dollar might be robbing you of some joy. There's something to be said for occasionally making a spontaneous purchase or taking a trip without having every detail planned and budgeted in advance. The key is finding the right balance between security and spontaneity.
I used to budget every single expense, down to the penny, and while it made me feel financially secure, it also made spending money feel stressful and guilty, even when I could afford it. Now, I still budget and save, but I also set aside a small amount each month for what I call happiness spending, money that I can use without guilt on whatever seems like it might bring me joy. Sometimes it's a concert ticket. Sometimes it's a nice bottle of wine to share with friends. Sometimes it's just a book I want to read. Having that freedom within boundaries has actually made me happier with my money. The authors also tackle one of the biggest sources of money stress in America right now, the pressure to keep up with lifestyle inflation. Every time we get a raise, we tend to increase our spending to match, which means we never actually feel like we're getting ahead financially. But the research shows that people who resist lifestyle inflation and instead direct raises toward experiences, relationships, and giving are significantly happier than those who just upgrade their stuff. When I got my last promotion, instead of moving to a more expensive apartment or buying a newer car, I used the extra income to take more interesting vacations and to increase my charitable giving. My day-to-day expenses stayed basically the same, but my life satisfaction went way up because I was using that extra money for things that actually create lasting happiness. This connects to perhaps the most important finding in the entire book, that our spending decisions are largely habitual, which means we can change them if we're intentional about it. Most of us spend money the same way we learned from our families or our peer groups, without ever really questioning whether those patterns are actually making us happy. But small changes in spending habits can create big changes in life satisfaction. The authors suggest starting with what they call spending experiments, trying different approaches to purchases you make regularly and paying attention to how they make you feel. Maybe you try buying lunch for a coworker once a week instead of just buying your own lunch. Maybe replace one material purchase with an experience. Maybe donate to a charity instead of buying something you don't really need. The key is to approach it like a scientist, studying your own happiness, not like someone trying to completely overhaul their life overnight.
As we wrap up, let me share the 3 biggest insights from this book that have personally transformed how I think about money and happiness. First, the goal isn't to spend less money. It's to spend the same money in ways that create more lasting joy. This might mean buying fewer things, but more experiences, or spending more on others and less on yourself, or choosing purchases that bring you together with people instead of isolating you. Second, happiness from spending comes more from how you spend than from how much you spend. The family that saves up for months to take a special trip together might get more joy from their vacation than someone who takes expensive trips all the time without thinking about it. The person who buys a modest gift for someone they care about might feel happier than someone who spends 10 times as much on something for themselves. Third, breaking free from cultural expectations about spending is one of the most powerful things you can do for both your financial and emotional well-being. Just because everyone else is buying bigger houses, newer cars, and more stuff doesn't mean that's what will make you happy. Figure out what actually brings you joy and have the courage to spend money on that instead of what you think you're supposed to want. Look, this book isn't going to solve all your money problems or turn you into some perfectly rational spender overnight, but it will give you a completely different framework for thinking about the relationship between money and happiness, and that framework can transform your life. Elizabeth Dunn and Michael Norton didn't just write another personal finance book. They cracked the code on how to use money as a tool for joy instead of stress. The bottom line is this. Money absolutely can buy happiness, but only if you spend it right. Stop spending to impress others, stop accumulating stuff just because you can afford it, and start spending in ways that align with what actually makes human beings happy. Experiences, relationships, generosity, and time for the things that matter most. Your bank account might not look much different, but your life satisfaction is going to skyrocket. The choice is yours. Keep spending the way everyone else does and feeling stressed about money, or start spending the way science says actually works and discover that money really can be a source of joy in your life. Trust me, once you start applying these principles, you'll never think about money the same way again.